Have you ever really thought about how a disease gets its start? I mean, not with the first cough or the first ache, but way before that, deep down inside a single, tiny cell. Well, today, that's exactly where we're going. We're going to follow the story, step by step.
Right, this is the big question, isn't it? It's really at the heart of all medicine. So we're going to trace that exact chain reaction, mapping out the whole process, starting from one single cell under stress all the way to the symptoms that tell you you're sick. To do that, we have to begin with what a normal, healthy cell looks like.
You see, to really get what goes wrong, you first have to appreciate what right looks like for a cell. And for a cell, right means being a master of balance, just constantly working to keep everything inside itself, well, just right.
And that perfect balance has a name: homeostasis. Think of it as the cell's happy place, its ideal state of being. Everything, its structure, its function, is humming along perfectly. Everything kept in this very narrow, normal range.
But life isn't always so calm and stable. Stressors pop up all the time. Maybe an increased workload, not enough nutrients, or just plain old harsh conditions. These things push the cell out of its comfort zone. And to survive, it has to do something. It has to change. It has to adapt. And this is where the story starts to get really, really interesting. Because the cell's first reaction to stress isn't just to give up and break down. No, its first instinct is to change. It pulls off these incredible modifications called adaptations. They're its first line of defense against a tough new world.
To handle whatever's being thrown at it, a cell has a whole toolkit with 4 main strategies. It can shrink, it can get bigger, it can make more of itself, or, and this one is wild, it can even change into a completely different type of cell. So let's see a couple of these in action.
Okay, first up is atrophy. This is when cells shrink down. It's basically a survival strategy to save energy. If a muscle isn't being used or an organ isn't getting enough blood, the cells just shrink down to lower their needs. They're trying to fly under the radar.
And the result of this can be absolutely stunning. On the right, that's a healthy, full brain. But on the left, that's a brain that has atrophied because of a long-term lack of blood flow. Just look at how the gyri, those ridges of the brain, have narrowed and pulled back. You are literally looking at the loss of brain tissue.
Now, the opposite of atrophy is hypertrophy. Instead of shrinking, the cells get bigger. This usually happens when cells are forced to work harder, like when a muscle is put under a lot more strain than it's used to.
And here's a really powerful and frankly dangerous example. The heart on the bottom has what's called left ventricular hypertrophy. The muscle wall has gotten super thick so it can pump against chronic high blood pressure. But this adaptation, it comes at a huge cost. That thicker muscle is stiffer, it's less efficient, and it needs way more oxygen, which can eventually lead straight to heart failure.
Then we've got hyperplasia. This one isn't about size, it's all about numbers. The cells respond to some kind of trigger by dividing and multiplying, essentially creating more soldiers to handle the job.
Okay, here's the absolute key point to remember. These adaptations are basically temporary survival hacks. They are reversible. If the stress goes away, the cell can go back to normal. But they are not a permanent fix. Think of it like a dam holding back a flood. It can work for a while, but if the pressure keeps rising and rising, eventually that dam's gonna break. And that's exactly what happens to a cell.
So when that breaking point is finally reached, the adaptation fails. The cell crosses a line, and it moves from a state of adaptation into a state of actual injury. Now, cell injury comes in 2 flavors. At first, it might be reversible. If you remove the stress, the cell can actually repair itself and bounce back. But if that stress keeps up, the cell hits the point of no return. The injury becomes irreversible, and from that moment on, the cell is destined to die. There's no going back.
So what's the biggest culprit here? Of all the things that can injure a cell, the single most common one is hypoxia, just a plain old lack of sufficient oxygen. And this is most often caused by ischemia, which means there's just not enough blood flow getting to the tissue to deliver that oxygen.
And a lack of oxygen kicks off this absolutely devastating chain reaction. It's like a row of dominoes. First, no oxygen means the cell's power plants, the mitochondria, can't make energy, or ATP. Second, without energy, the critical pumps on the cell's surface fail. Third, with the pumps down, sodium and water rush into the cell, causing it to swell up like a balloon. And finally, that swelling stretches and ruptures the cell's membranes, causing irreversible damage.
So once that injury becomes irreversible, the cell is going to die. But as we're about to see,
How it dies is every bit as important as why it dies.
There are really two main ways a cell can go out. The first is necrosis. Think of it as a messy, violent death from an injury. The cell swells, it bursts, and it spills all its guts out, which causes a big inflammatory mess in the tissue around it. Then there's apoptosis. This is an orderly, programmed self-destruction. The cell just quietly shrinks, packages itself up into neat little bags, and gets cleaned away without any fuss or inflammation.
Since necrosis is the messy one that happens because of disease and injury, let's zoom in on that. What's really fascinating is that it doesn't look the same everywhere in the body. The type of tissue it's happening in completely changes what it looks like.
So this is coagulative necrosis. It's what you typically see in solid organs, like the heart after a heart attack. The injury basically cooks the cell's proteins, so even though the cells are dead, the basic ghostly outline of the tissue structure stays visible for a little while.
But in the brain, you see something completely different: liquefactive necrosis. Here, the dead cells release enzymes that just digest the tissue, turning the whole area into a thick, liquid goo. It's a pretty stark reminder of how differently our tissues can react to the exact same problem.
Okay, so we've followed the story from a single stressed cell, through its attempts to adapt, to injury, and then finally to its death. But how does all of this microscopic drama translate into the stuff a patient actually feels? How does it become a symptom?
So how does a bunch of dying cells actually make you feel sick? Well, when millions of cells die that messy way, through necrosis, they burst open and spill all their insides out. Your body sees all this cellular junk as a major danger signal, and it launches a massive, body-wide inflammatory response. Your immune system pumps out chemicals that raise your thermostat, causing a fever. Those same chemicals hit your brain, making you feel exhausted. They make nerve endings more sensitive, causing pain. It's not really the dead cells themselves you're feeling. It's your body's powerful, systemic reaction to all that cellular carnage.
And there you have it. From a cell just trying to keep its balance, to adaptation, to injury, and finally to death and the symptoms we feel, it's all one long, continuous story. A chain reaction that starts with one cell's fight for survival. And honestly, understanding this fundamental pathway, well, that's the very beginning of understanding disease itself.